Welcome ladies and gentlemen. If you've been looking for a build similar to Primal Rage but not as risky, then the MG4 Predator is a build for you. Hi, I'm On, and in this guide we'll dive into how to properly build this weapon, starting with its weapon features. So first feature is 40% chance to trigger Fast Gunner when hitting the enemy. And if you don't know what Fast Gunner is yet, it's basically a continuous buff which grants you 1% fire rate and 1% attack per stack, and this effect can stack up to 5 times by default. Then, whenever Fast Gunner stacks reach a multiple of 5, gain unlimited ammo for 0.5 seconds. Pretty cool. This is what will allow you to deal more damage per mag. Then, hitting the same target consecutively grants 2% weapon damage per hit, stacking up to 60%, and stacks are halved when the target is changed. So this feature essentially makes the Predator more of a boss killing weapon, since it loses some of its effectiveness when shooting at ads, since you'll be target switching. And now, lastly, when the remaining bullets is more than 50% of the magazine capacity, attack plus 40%, which is an important multiplier that affects bullet damage. So going off of the weapon features, we now know that the weapon relies solely on bullet damage, so weapon blueprint stars will matter a lot for this gun's damage. So for the calibration that you're going to want to run, you have two choices here. The first choice is Overflow Calibration, which is a calibration that you can only obtain in Deviant Invasion tagged servers. And the second choice is Rapid Shot Style. Now as for the better one, that will be Overflow, assuming you are shooting over a very long period of time. So for instance, if you are clearing Nightmare silos with this weapon. However, if you aren't doing that, Rapid Shot Style will do just fine and the difference isn't really noticeable. Just make sure that the calibration substats are double crit rate. Moving on to the accessories, I'm using the large break for the accuracy increase, then I'm using the compact reflex sight for the stability, the tactical laser sight for the accuracy once again, then the large LMG drum mag for the extra ammo, which will benefit from the 40% attack buff, and lastly, as for the ammo that I use, the best ammo to use will be suppression, penetration, or precision depending on the type of content that you are clearing. So if you're not sure which one of these three is the best for the content that you want to do, then after watching this Predator guide, feel free to watch my ammo guide where I detail it all. The link will be in the description of this video. Moving on to Deviation, you have two options, the first one being the Zap Cam, which is obtained from the Servitor dungeon in the Way of Winter server, and you have the Lone Wolf, which the normal version is obtained from the Monolith of Thirst. Now both deviations will increase weapon damage received by attack targets, but ideally you should go with the Lone Wolf, and the reason for this is because first of all there's a lunar variant which can only be obtained in lunar servers, and what it'll do is a permanent 5% or 7.5% weapon damage bonus depending on your sanity the moment you're synced with it. So this is nice, but the second thing about the Lone Wolf is that it'll also draw aggro, which is very important. Now for your secondary options, you've got three, which are all bullseye options. You've got the bingo, the wildfire, and the crossbow, and the reason for this is because they give the bullseye effect, which is vulnerability plus 8%. Now starting with the recurve crossbow, you'll inflict bullseye with it, and it'll also give a 15% crit rate as long as you hit a weak spot. So this is the best option if you're only going to mark once. So if you're going to mark multiple times, then you'll find better results with a bingo. Now the bingo can give up to 45% weak spot damage bonus, which is a lot as well. And on top of that, it'll give you 15% attack if you kill an enemy prior. So bingo and crossbow will be your best options depending on the type of enemies you're facing and how many times you want to mark. But lastly, of course, if the enemy doesn't have weak spots, then you can definitively use wildfire for the 25% weapon damage bonus. Now I know the last feature says when hitting a weak spot of marked enemies, attack plus 3% for 10 seconds, up to 3 stacks. Unfortunately, this feature does not carry over if you swap back to the Predator. Now for the melee weapon, you're going to want to use the Kukri. It is unfortunately only a droppable weapon from clearing dungeons and from the Primar loot. Now the reason why we're using the Kukri is for its massive buff, which is defeating a target, grants all weapons attack plus 30%, which is very important for the Predator, and critical rate plus 15%, which is very good as well. Now here, to get all this buff, you do have to defeat a target, but here, instead of killing an actual enemy, what you will want to do is rely on this deviation, which is the ice pot. You can get this in the WoW scenario, or you can also simply just trade it with another player, but essentially, this deviation will craft you sticky ice crystals, and with those sticky ice crystals, let's say I just throw one here, actually I threw two, but you know, I spawned two here. Essentially, if I just defeat it with the kukri, you'll see here from the buff list that I got attack plus 30% and crit rate plus 15%, and if I swap weapons, the buff still stays. Now moving on to the key gear, there's only one option, and that will be the Oasis Mask. The Oasis Mask gives a Fast Gunner max stacks plus 10, so you'll be able to stack 10 more Fast Gunner stacks, and it'll also provide 1% attack per Fast Gunner stack. This is the best and the only option for the Predator, since, well, if you take a look at the other Fast Gunner options, so Charm Mag Top, this is pretty much made for the Primal Rage, since this effect is mostly triggered when you're at 1% ammo, and then for instance, for the Dust Mask, well, this is for the Memento. Now, before I talk about the gear sets, if you're learning something new or wish to see more Once Human content, then make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell for any notifications. Also, let me know in the comments which build you'd like to see next, and with that, we continue forward to the gear sets. So for the first and general best option, it will be 2-piece Lone Wolf with 3 Treacherous pieces. So the 2 Lone Wolf pieces will give some extra ammo per mag and 5% crit rate, whereas Treacherous will give a permanent 50% weapon damage as long as your HP is below 70% HP and you respect the sanity decrease condition from its 3-piece effect. And that can be done by lowering your sanity manually via different food items. So just to name a few, you've got Dirty Water, which reduces your sanity by 300 points. You've got oranges, just any type of raw meat, and you've also got Spoiled Food. Now, if you do end up using Spoiled Food or anything that induces this effect, which is gastric discomfort, then you're going to want to have some antibiotics on hand. But currently, there's like this bug where if you just eat rabbit meat or maybe like any other kind of meat, you won't actually get the gastric discomfort effect. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Now, during Lunar Oracle, this set loses its damage advantage because you automatically restore sanity when killing enemies. So if you don't want to do the low HP build, or if you're doing Lunar Oracle, then you would want to run 3-piece Lone Wolf and 2-piece Treacherous Tides instead. Now, Treacherous Tides 2-piece still requires you to stay under 70% HP, so you could swap that out for something else. So for instance, Savior set, which gives you 10%, but you'd have to be over 70% HP, which I heavily don't recommend. But essentially, now instead of getting the 50% weapon damage bonus from the 3-piece Treacherous effect, you will get up to 48% crit damage with the 3-piece Lone Wolf effect. Now just keep in mind that this set combo will be weaker than the first option. And the simple reason for this would just be due to the fact that Lone Wolf requires you to stack its 3-piece effect, whereas Treacherous is a permanent 50% weapon damage buff. Now moving on to the mask hide that you're going to want to use for the extra damage bonus, that would be Lunar Wolfskin, because it's weak spot damage plus 4% by default, and the effect plus 8%, so you'll end up at 12% if your HP is below 30%. Though of course you would have to hit weak spots. So say if you really want to min-max this and the enemy does not have weak spots, or if you just straight up don't hit them, then in that case you'd want Golden Wool, which is weapon damage and status damage plus 12% in total between them, with the proportion changing every second. Moving on to Cradle perks, I'm currently in a Lunar scenario, so I'll go over those. If you are in a Novice scenario, do note that you won't have the same Cradle as I do, but you're going to want to equip Anti-Coherence for the LMG and Coherence Anomaly damage bonus, Tactical Combo for the weapon damage bonus, Deviant Energy Defense for the important shield, Steady Hand for the Fast Gunner linked buffs. Then you'll want Marked Strike for the weak spot damage bonus against marked enemies. You'll also want Fast Pursuit for the Fast Gunner linked buffs. Then lastly, Resilience and Chaotic Thoughts for the damage and damage reduction bonus against all kind of enemies. Now I do note that the description says that it's only effective against deviants, but I'll show it to you later that it actually works against any type of enemy in the game. Now, if you feel like you don't need this damage reduction from Resilience, then of course you can swap it out for Bounty Hunter, which is essentially a weapon damage bonus that gets transferred once you've marked a few enemies, and then swap out your bullseye weapon for the MG4. Now, to show you that these two perks are actually against any type of enemy. Here I am sitting at, well, I actually have like just no HP, but I have a whim due to low sanity, and if I take a look at my stat sheet, you'll see that in my damage bonuses, I have damage bonuses against any type of enemy in the game. As for my damage reduction, I have 40% damage reduction against any type of enemy in the game, though 40%, if you're confused why, this is because Chaotic Thoughts gives me 10, and Resilience gives me 30. Moving on to the food buffs, starting with the food slot, you're going to want to eat mixed fried hot dog, as it's 20% damage bonus against marked enemies, which counts as X-type damage bonus, which is very strong since it's a multiplier that you don't have a lot of. Then as for the drink slot, there isn't anything that specifically buffs this weapon's damage, so just go with any movement drink of your choice, such as Stardust Mushroom Soup. Of course, you can also eat Stardust Raspberry Shaved Ice to increase your continuous debuff effect duration. Moving over to the substats priority, starting with the weapon mod and the mask mod, you will want to use the keyword suffix, here being fast gunner suffix. And as linked attribute, you will want to look for when in fast gunner state, crit damage plus 20%. Though if you are lucky, you could try to get this and the weak spot damage bonus at the same time and only get as general attribute 1 damage bonus against X type, depending on the type of content that you're clearing. Though usually you won't really be that lucky, so you'll only get crit damage bonus as linked attribute and then 2 damage bonuses against X type of enemies. Then for the helmet and top mod, if you can, try to get a lunar mod. So if you're in a lunar server, you can get lunar suffix, and the reason why we will go with this on the helmet and top is because, well, lunar suffix gives way more bonuses than your normal violent suffix. So for instance, here as fixed attribute, you can get 30% crit damage bonus, and here as linked attribute, you can get 12% weapon damage bonus. Now here 30% and 12% is a lot. It's actually double the value that violent gives, which is 15% crit damage and 6% weapon damage bonus. And so for everything other than helmet and top, unless if you can't get lunar suffix, you would want to run a violent suffix mod with linked attribute being weapon damage bonus and with 2 damage bonuses against X type of enemies as your general attributes. Now before talking about mods to run, I just want to share that if you aren't sure how mods work or how and where to get them, then I've got this mod spreadsheet for you to check out. Every mod in the game is in there, and the link will be in the description and pinned comment. Starting with the Predators mod, the ideal mod to run will be Precision Rush. It gives a massive amount of weak spot damage bonus, 15% per second as a matter of fact, and stacking up to 45%. However, this is only good if you consistently hit weak spots. So if you don't, or if the enemy straight up doesn't have any weak spots, then you can opt for Shootout, which instead of giving weak spot damage bonus, it gives weapon damage bonus, though only up to 30%. Though we won't go for the other options since they'll be weaker for this weapon. So shooting Blitz, sure, it'll allow you to keep your fast gunner stacks after a reload. However, it's only 15% weapon damage bonus, so it's not really that good. Now for the Bullseye Weapons mod, you'll want to go with Vulnerability Amplifier to add an extra 8% of vulnerability. Moving on to the Helmet mod, you have 3 options. You have Momentum Up, then you have Fateful Strike, and lastly, you also have Precise Strike. Now starting with Fateful, this is the best option when the enemy doesn't have any weak spots. Then, if the enemy does have weak spots, and assuming you have a high weak spot hit rate, the choice between Momentum Up and Precise Strike will depend on your own weak spot to weapon damage ratios. So if you have much more weapon damage bonus than weak spot damage bonus, then don't go with Momentum Up and choose Precise Strike. Moving over to the Mask mod, the 2 options will be between Blitzkrieg and Explosive Barrage. Now, Explosive Barrage gives 10% crit rate and 10% weapon damage bonus, whereas Blitzkrieg gives an extra 5 stacks of Fast Gunner and a 1% fire rate per Fast Gunner stack. Now, really, the difference between both mods isn't really that big, so I would say just pick the one that has the best substats on it. Moving over to the Gloves mod, you have 2 options here once again. You have Crit Amplifier and you have Crit Boost. Now, due to the simple fact of not having a lot of crit rate compared to crit damage on the Predator, we will prioritize Crit Boost. But as always, you might currently not have a good crit boost, but have a very good crit amplifier, for instance, so you can definitely swap between the 2. For the Boots mod, you have 2 options. You have Covered Advance and you have Rush Hour. Now, if you don't do the low HP build, then you can simply just go with covered advance. It's either less conditional or straight up gives more buffs than all of the other options. But if you do the low HP build of this weapon, then you will definitely want to run Rush Hour for that 24% weapon damage bonus, because Rush Hour gives 4% melee, weapon, and status damage bonus based on every 10% HP loss. And if you reduce all of your sanity to 0%, you will permanently benefit from 24% instead of the 20% given by covered advance. Moving over to the top mod, you can pick any defensive gold mod of your choice with the best substats in it in mind. So for instance, if you're doing the low HP build, you can definitely go for Ardent Shield. However, if you use rapid shot style calibration, then you will definitely want to use quick comeback to reload by using healing shots instead of reloading manually, because the reload is much faster if you just use a healing shot. Though here for me, of course, I'm just going to stick to quick comeback since I've got a triple gold mod right here. Lastly, for the pants mod, the best mod to run will be Deadshot, since each crit hit by non-melee weapons, so the Predator, grants plus 5% crit damage, stacking up to a massive amount of 45%. However, if you don't have a Deadshot, or if your Deadshot is just horrible, then you can definitely use Bullet Siphon, which instead of giving crit damage, it'll give weapon damage, though a much lower amount. And this is it for this guide. As usual, like and subscribe if you haven't, and comment down below what you'd like to see next. This was Mon, peace out.